Welcome to the Alliance for Charitable Gifting of Real Estate. Cami Baker, your host with Unity Radio 97.9 FM. We are Worcester's community connection right outside of Boston. And because I'm interviewing so many wonderful people all over the country who are real estate professionals, property donors, and the nonprofits that are benefiting from these charitable real estate, we want you to know that you can also watch us on Facebook and on our live stream on streaming live at WUTY979FM.org. And today's guest is Laura Malone. She is a representative of one of the nonprofits who has benefited so generously by a property owner donating their property. And we're going to get her perspective as the nonprofit and just how the whole thing went down. Laura, introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. As Cami mentioned, my name is Laura Malone. I am a vice president with American Endowment Foundation. I head up our team that accepts gifts of complex assets. So aside from gifts of real estate, like Cami mentioned, we also deal with gifts of closely held business interests, gifts of life insurance, gifts of private equity or private placement, non-marketable securities, which makes up roughly about 1% of our overall charitable portfolio. In the last 5 years, we've done roughly about $500 million of charitable contributions and transactions within that complex space. So, and that does include real estate, like Cami mentioned.
Now, that 500 million is the 1%, or you do 1% of the 500 million?
No, that 500 million is a little more like 1.5% when you get to that. Our current portfolio of what we're holding is roughly about 280 million. Our overall charitable capital that we have on hand with our donors is right around 3.4 billion.
Got it. Wow. So you are the real deal. You are business savvy. You know how all these different pieces of donation work. When you and I talked originally, we talked about how you used to take real estate yourself, but now you actually do implement Realty Gift Fund. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So we've been implementing Realty Gift Fund in some of our transactions for about the last 2 to 3 years. And a lot of that was precipitated by, while real estate can be a wonderful contribution, and we'll talk about that in a lot of ways, in some cases it can be a lot for an individual charity to handle. And that was what we were beginning to encounter with some of the gifts that we had received. Because those properties don't always liquidate right away, there's a lot of continual maintenance that needs done with those gifts. We had one property in particular that was an amazing gift of about $2 million, but it took probably about a year for that property to liquidate. And in that time, we were dealing with property managers, we were dealing with homeowners associations, we were dealing with probably about 12 different vendors on a monthly basis that were all associated with that gift of real estate. And for us as an organization, that was a little bit outside of our normal scope of what we deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Well, and what I want our listeners to hear is that whether you're a brand new nonprofit who doesn't have any budget, you're just getting started, or whether you're one of the biggest in the country, taking real estate can be a huge funding capability for you, but you don't have to worry about being the one that handles the transactions. In other words, if you're helping veterans, help veterans. If you're helping children, help children. Let the Alliance and Realty Gift Fund help you with the transaction. So having said that, American Endowment Foundation, can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yes, so we are a national donor advised fund program. So a lot of our work is done with donors that are creating donor advised funds as their charitable vehicles. So if you think of the donor advised fund as kind of their charitable bucket, they work with American Endowment Foundation to contribute those properties to AEF to create their personal charitable bucket that they use to continue their philanthropy for days, weeks, months, decades, generations, however they see fit with their personal guidelines. So it does allow them to free up supporting multiple charities all at once with a single source point of entry for those gifts. So like with the gifts of real estate or with the gifts of closely held business interests, those tend to be fairly significant gifts. Often they are over 6 figures in size. And often the donors that want to make those gifts want to be able to support more than one charitable entity in that process. So by working with an entity like Realty Gift Fund as it aligns with real estate, or with AEF as it aligns with closely held business interests, they can make those gifts directly into Realty Gift Fund, have those proceeds come to AEF for their donor advised fund, or have those proceeds come to other charities or split among the different charities of their choice, so that they can use that larger gift to leverage giving capacity to more than one organization in that process.
Well, thank you for that. And with us interviewing you today, you bring a whole different flavor than a typical, say, nonprofit, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit more about why people would want to contact you and set up these advisory funds, what the process looks like? Like, what is a typical person who doesn't know what you do? They're just learning about it. What do they need to know about why they want to do this and how to do it?
So the best example I can use with the use of donor advised funds is typically the idea of somebody that has a large amount of money that they know they want to dedicate to philanthropy. They might just not know exactly what charities they want to give to today, or they want to use this as a way to engage their family in a legacy of giving. So they want to be able to have those buckets of resources available through their donor advised fund, to get the kids engaged, to get the grandkids engaged, to allow each of those family members to create their own charitable affiliations, to support their own charitable passions through that single source of the donor advised fund. The benefit of the donor advised fund in particular, kind of like what we mentioned with Realty Gift Fund and the gift of real estate, is oftentimes it can allow them to leverage larger assets, more significant assets, where they can garner that tax deduction immediately in the year that they make the gift to American Endowment Foundation or to Realty Gift Fund, and then allow the benefit of that gift to distribute over a longer period of time. So that gift of, a $600,000 property that is given to Realty Gift Fund, or $1 million of business ownership interests, can actually fund, 6 years, 10 years, 15 years of charitable giving, with the act of that one gift being made to the organizations.
So for those of us who are lay people around this and aren't really familiar, is it kind of like one of those where you find out about all these places that give grants, and maybe there's a place that says apply here to get a $10,000 grant for women-owned businesses or minorities or nonprofits that are helping veterans specifically? Is that where some of that money comes from?
So in some cases it may. More often than not, you'll see a lot of community foundations play that role. Community foundations are also a source for donor advised funds that will work with donors on looking to fund certain missions, maybe help them create programs of funding where donors can solicit to the community foundation and have them do that. It's not something that we do specifically, but there are ways that can be created with that benefit in mind, for the ability for folks to solicit funding. More often, the donor advised funds are more often equated to the idea of almost the cousin of the private foundation. So you hear in the media about, different private foundations that are making large contributions. The donor advised funds are often akin to that in a lot of ways. They're just structured a little bit differently than what is normally thought of with those private foundations, because they're housed under a public charity like American Endowment Foundation, or like the Community Foundation of Boston, or whatever the case may be.
Got it. I'm curious, how did you get started in this industry? How long have you been with the AEF?
I've been with AEF for over a decade now. I was in the private sector for a number of years. Ironically, was in commercial real estate prior to joining American Endowment Foundation, and got recruited in 2009 by one of AEF's board members, and thought it was a perfect way to blend the idea of what I felt about philanthropy and being able to democratize that across a broader scope, rather than working for just a single issue charity, being able to work with donors and helping them support every charitable affiliation that they had. So in our mind, it doesn't matter whether you want to support the puppies or support the homeless or support any other, great charitable asset that's out there. It's a matter of helping you kind of build that better mousetrap to be able to help increase the efficacy of how you're supporting those organizations.
So before we go to break in about 60 seconds, you were a commercial agent. Had you ever heard of the charitable gifting of real estate?
Not very often, no. It was one of those things that even when I left my my commercial real estate company to join American Endowment Foundation, a lot of those folks that were senior to me that had SOIRs, that had CCIMs, really weren't familiar with the idea of it either. So it was definitely an untapped resource that, I think has a lot of opportunity.
No doubt about it. And that's why, for me, having a history in real estate for many years, over a decade of being a prospector and a door knocker and a phone call maker and an objection handler and a networker and all that, never heard anything about it. Learned about 1031s. A lot of agents know about that, a lot don't. And then with working with nonprofits and seeing how much they struggle with their fundraising, I saw this as the golden win that it is for everyone, for the real estate agent, because working with Realty Gift Fund is a guaranteed full commission. And for the real estate agents who are so giving and so wonderful, and they sit on boards and they volunteer and they pick up the poo and they do all the stuff. But let's face it, they need to get paid too, So it's been my experience that when they hear charitable gifting of real estate, I can see it in their face. It's almost like, well, that's nice, but I'm not in the business of giving property away. I'm in the business of selling it. So it's really important for me to let them know that not only do you get paid doing this, you get paid really well, and you get to work with the seller, Realty Gift Fund, that is easy to work with. And we'll talk about that when we get back. So Cami Baker here with Unity Radio 97.9 FM, WUTY979FM.org. Alliance for Charitable Real Estate. We'll be right back.